Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series. We take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the adventure, The Feypool Beauty, designed by Revelation Studios, aka Kera Hildebrandt and Noah Stavish, for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. This adventure is also available in a Roll20 version. If you're interested in a sponsored review, you can reach out to me via email or Discord or by submission form at roguewatson.com. And if you enjoy the content, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. You wouldn't know it based on the cover, but the Feypool Beauty is actually a horror adventure, a horror mystery. In fact, it's a specific subgenre of horror that I don't know if there's a name for this genre of horror, but it's the one. It's not like a slash or anything, but or even like a haunted house thing, which is usually what you end up seeing in D&D. This kind of horror genre you don't usually witness too often, unless it's Lovecraftian tends to go in this direction, which is like an entire isolated village is the evil, right? It's like the players are brought to, or they stumble upon this area where like everybody's in on the evil. It's usually like they're part of a cult, or there's some kind of corruption going on or something. I guess film wise, I'm trying maybe like Midsommar or something would be kind of an example of that, where like it's a whole group of people who are, the bad guys basically, instead of necessarily one central figure. Now in this case, however, there is a central figure who is the villain, and she happens to be just corrupting everybody else. So she's actually the big boss, and that is the Feypool Beauty from the actual cover. Again, you would not know looking at this. This is a horror adventure completely. It is designed for 5th level, and it takes place in a basically any isolated area, but it should be in a swampy region, because that's what's going to make sense in terms of the encounter when the players actually reach the location, as well as the fact there's like I don't know, hags and swamps kind of make sense. So it even says, hey, Forgotten Realms, go ahead and put it in Schult, which to me that's a little extreme. There's other swamps besides one that's crawling with like dinosaurs and zombies and shit, but that could be an option, I suppose. I do love the way that this adventure is organized and laid out. It does not feature the typical format, I guess, of a lot of the 5e adventures and supplements that I've been reviewing, but I do like this kind of really brown, crinkly looking paper. I'm less enthused about the lily pads on the edge, but this whole thing, it looks like kind of an old school computer game manual, which I really dig. But the actual organization works really, really well. Basically, it explains what the adventure is all about. At the very beginning, it gives me the dramatis personae, the important characters, kind of an expected adventure flow, although this adventure is not for the faint of heart. I don't mean that in terms of content. I mean that in terms of complexity for running it as a DM. That's not to say it's bad. In fact, I think it's a very good adventure, but I would caution this is not for newcomer DMs or for those who are looking for maybe an easy one shot or something. This is a very dense, story rich adventure, and you as the DM need to be on board with that, but your players also need to be on board with that. If you don't think they're going to get invested in this story, and they're more of like the hack and slash variety, honestly, I don't think they're probably going to enjoy this adventure, even though I think it's a very well written, well done adventure. It is very heavy on story and exploration and requires a lot of the players really taking the initiative and going around this incredibly detailed town. We've got adventure hooks at the beginning, and as I mentioned, this kind of example adventure flow where kind of different events can trigger. It's not necessarily based on a bunch of events though. It's not like, hey, this happens day one, this happens day two. It's kind of up for the DM to decide when to trigger different things. And there's only like 2 or 3 like real triggers you need to be able to hit. Otherwise, the players are really designed to go around and explore this very, very large, detailed town and kind of uncover what's going on, the evils that are here. And I love that there's kind of a red herring, which actually does exist. So I guess it's not a true red herring, in that this town has been attacked by hags in the past, and there's only one hag left, and that hag is still around and still up to no good. But the whole backstory for this character, this is Marietta is her name, although she's really Ezra Beta, which is part of the noble ruling family here. She was I guess, sold to the hag in kind of a very shady, evil deal from one of the noble members to kind of spare her their children. And there's this whole backstory about how she was kind of being groomed to be, another hag, but before the final transformation took place, she managed to escape and get back to town. But unfortunately, the townsfolk mistook her for a monster, and she was slain by her own brother. And she never really truly died because she was kind of in the midst of her transformation. There's this really creepy scene the players can even stumble upon where you can witness her being like burned, but it's like not really killing her and just like screams coming out of the oven. Like it's fucking crazy. Again, you wouldn't expect that with the cover. Do not judge this by the cover. It's pretty dark and messed up in a lot of places. Although there's no content warnings here that I could see. I guess body horror is a little bit of I don't know, it's not overly violent, I guess is a good way to put it, or gory. It's not like a slasher thing. It's you recall these really creepy elements from the past, which I love the way horror can play out in a tabletop RPG, because with classic like past ghostly scenes manifesting in front of the players, and sure enough, there's different scenes that happen here. All of these pages we're looking at right now, by the way, are to explain this whole build-up and this backstory with this main villain, which is really well done, and clues you into the fact that, again, this is a very strictly, it's yes, RP heavy, but mainly just exploration heavy, which I guess in a town, if you're exploring a town, that kind of lends itself to role playing, but you're also uncovering clues. There's, ghosts you can interact with and talk to. There's, secret places you can get into. And the whole town is like under this hive mind because she's corrupted. Her real body is like down in the well, and she's been corrupting the water supply of this town. So anybody who's drinking anything, has basically fallen under her curse, and thus she can kind of puppet everybody around, with only, a few exceptions. And of course, there's a few people you can talk to who are not part of this curse, and they become very useful NPCs. It's very, very tightly woven in terms of each area even has its own, like, hey, this happens during the day. By the way, I apologize for this light coming in. I need to get curtains for this. For my office. I'm recording this at apparently the worst possible time of day, talking about spookiness, and there's just like lights spilling in on me. Apologize for the distraction there. Look at this amazing map art though. Holy crap, this is gorgeous, and I love it because this is not a dungeon crawl adventure, and I'm somebody who loves dungeon crawls. I think that's a huge good part of doing D&D, is the classic dungeon crawl, no matter how it plays out or how it manifests. In this case, this is not at all a dungeon crawl adventure. This is kind of an urban adventure, in that it takes place in a civilized location, and yet it's dangerous, but there's no real combat. So there's one cool combat scene in the beginning. I don't think we actually get a picture of it until the appendix, but there's this swamp chimera that can attack the players. It's supposed to be this really creepy thing that the players can't even really necessarily beat at this level. It's a CR 10 for 5th level. I'm meant to just kind of, jack them up a little bit. And then they're getting chased by the hag a little bit as they make it to the town. And then there's supposed to be the idea that, the red herring is that the hag is causing all of these problems and corrupting the town and doing all that. But that's really what's happening, is the hag is trying to get her, junior hag back that she was grooming. But then Marietta doesn't want to be with her, but she also doesn't quite want to. It's like this whole interesting toxic thing where it's this classic like tragic villain thing, which to me, great horror always loves its villain, right? It creates such big storytelling opportunities for its villain, dives into its villain. Like the villain usually looms larger than any of the heroes. It's the villains that actually tie the series together. And I think that that's very much the case here, where Marietta is such a major part of this adventure. And in fact, she's just an NPC the players can even interact with while they're here exploring the town. And there's, certain rules for that. And it's up to the DM on when you want to trigger the final event. And there's some, suggestions here and there about, well, you can do it when they stumble into the old Feypool area, which is marked as I here. Or maybe when, they discover the truth about Marietta somewhere else, or they make it to the palace and they discover, different truths and things. So I like that that's kind of open-ended. But again, it makes it that the flip side of that is it makes it harder for newer DMs or those running, maybe a little bit of a smaller schedule. You're trying to do this in a one shot or something, which I don't think you would be able to do at all. It's just, there's too much here. I just don't. It's like expert level DMing to me, this one, and I say that not as a detriment, just as commentary. This is If you're up to the task and your players are really into being involved in a very heavy, well-written story, like all the plot points make sense and all there's good character development and everything, then I think you're going to get a lot out of this. Most of this adventure from page, what are we at, 14, when we start chapter 2 of Feypool, all the way. I'm going to be flipping. Look at this. We're on chapter 3, Agatha's cabin, which is technically an optional dungeon they could do, is page 42. So you've got over 20 pages, which is, I believe, over 40 areas of basically places to explore and things to do around the town. And I love the way it's also laid out, where each of these areas is given its own nice descriptive text, which is good. I've reviewed a lot of adventures that don't do that, or they don't give you enough descriptions with, they might give you like one description for the town and that's it. This one really goes above and beyond by giving it for almost every single individual room. And then we get little maps within the maps, which is also amazing. Anytime there's a bigger map, so the palace or the inn, or even just sections of the actual, which I like the way this is done. Can't see me actually pointing to it with my actual hand, but the individual area of the town is even highlighted. And yes, this includes a separate zip file with maps, and then the maps have essentially the big, beautiful map that you saw on whatever was page 14. And it takes this map and then highlights individual areas and then breaks them down, because each of these areas has multiple like sub areas in the middle. So like right now you just see A, B, C, D, E, but then as you kind of scroll along, you might see like E1, E2, G1, G2. This is the cemetery area where you might see the crematorium in G4, and then that's blown up in another area, which is here. Just a really great way of doing map design that is very intuitive. I was never lost, for example, which can happen when I look at maps. I can try to figure out to make heads or tails of some areas, and this one, just one of the best map designs, not only in the actual like color of the map and just the look of it, but just the way it's organized and laid out. It was a huge relief, and that helps run what is frankly kind of a complex adventure to run, but having all that information and being able to easily parse where the players are. And then it almost seems like like playing a video game, and just have the map screen like zoom in as you travel around like the wider overland map, and then you might make it to a smaller area, and then your map level kind of zooms into that smaller area, and then you can walk around and see all those points of interest. And yes, you've got versions for gridded, non-gridded, and then for player and DM levels. The DM would have these annotations on there, and the player level would not. So really, really awesome map stuff. There's just a lot of stuff to do in this town. There's a ghost that was murdered by Marietta and her followers, which is most of the town. And you can talk to the ghost to then try and create, which is kind of part of the main quest, I think, where you can do this very like adventure game style mission to get a bunch of ingredients, which you can find around town, as well as at the hag's cabin. And then try to find this purification water that you can then, or potion that you can put into the final area that will kind of free the townsfolk and do everything. So I think that's it's supposed to be part of the main quest. You can meet with some of the last townsfolk who are free of the curse, which I believe are the clergy members who meet at night. There's that creepy ass scene in the crematorium where you can witness, and there's several of these scenes where you can kind of play out the past and see what's going on, which is part of just the excellent like storytelling and writing of this adventure, that it really kind of teases out. It's all there, but it teases out to the players as they advance along through the story. And it's just meant to be the players kind of have the initiative to go around to all these different locations and interact with all of these things. Or maybe as a DM you can try to guide them a little bit. They'll probably go to the palace first to meet with the actual the head noble, and then the Marietta is basically at the cusp of her final act, which is to take out the final member of the nobility, to make all the people rise up against the nobles, because she basically is completely pissed at her old family for destroying her and turning her back on her and everything, and basically selling her to the hag essentially. And so that's part of the revelation there, is you can discover that the one, I believe it's the Duke, is actually still alive in the basement. He's holding on to dear life. And then there's a cool scene where the one of the warlocks who's stationed at the place, he's one of the allies who's got it's anti-face, no, which is kind of goofy, but some MacGuffin device that makes him immune to the curse, but he can be corrupted at some point, and they can discover all these creepy things going on in old Feypool and kind of find out more of the truth. It's not written at all in a linear style, which that's what creates this complexity for the DM to really, you know, you have to really be able to play it on your feet if you're not going to try to create a linear system on top of this, which you don't have to, and the design certainly doesn't. But then you have to be able to, you know this entire area, which I think is what's really hard, and learn this entire town, and then be able to roll with how the players are going to approach everything. And it even gives you different like day night activities for all these different areas, which is also very impressive. Like during the day, you know, things just aren't as creepy, and then during at night, the players might be able to do other things, but they might find, you know, creepier things happening and get in trouble. And it gets a little vague in some cases in terms of, you know, well, what happens if they like just try to start a fight with Marietta too soon, or like, do they get thrown in jail or something if they, you know, try to rise up against the people? Like, it doesn't quite account for like all of those different things. It doesn't have like the detail of a heist, for example, where it talks about like all the different consequences the players can run into, but hopefully they can just kind of be on board. The palace, look at the palace, is so crazy looking too. Like, it's such a unique, colorful art style. It just, I can't help but fall in love. And I know an adventure isn't necessarily just its maps, but my goodness, y'all know I love my maps, and this has some of the most amazing maps I've seen in a very, very long time. Very cool looking. The big event that can trigger is that Abatha, who is the hag, the one surviving hag who had corrupted Marietta slash Ezrabeta, is still out. And it's kind of weird that she just straight up attacks the party. Like, I wish there was a little bit more for her to do. Instead, she just kind of follows the party around and doesn't really do anything until she finally just decides to attack. But even though she's let's see, what is she in the stat block? Yeah, she's a CR5. But she's by herself, and we all know, like, okay, even though CR5 is supposed to be a challenge for a 5th level party, like, the action economy, there's just no way the single hag is going to do jack crap against a full, like, 5th level party. So I take that back. She does summon a shambling mound at the same time. That's a bit better. But it seems odd that a hag would just straight up attack, because that's just not what hags do, right? They're about manipulating and more social scenes and things like that. And attacking is usually a last resort. So kind of was surprised about that one. And yet it is an important event, because it can lead to the party like jumping through her portal that she creates to go back to her cabin, which is useful because that's a little bit of a dungeon crawl. And the party can discover more, you know, important information in the cabin. They can fight a bunch of crawling claws in there, get some ingredients for the potion. Or you could even split the party and have some of them stay behind, in which case they have to deal with that Havoc character, who is the warlock of the Archfey, who could have a stone he loses the stone and gets corrupted, and he leads the party into like a trap, and then he ends up fighting them as a boss fight. So there's different triggers you can do to kind of create that like Act 2 to Act 3 transition. And then the actual final thing that happens is just the final fight with Marietta, which it just says you can trigger this whenever, feel the apparition has been exposed. You can do an old Feypool, or maybe after the Niphanes make a public accusation. Basically, you can trigger the kind of final thing at any time, which again, that's part of the complexity of running this adventure, is you, the DM, just have to be on top of when you want to do this. It's a very cool final fight. I wish it wasn't so vague in terms of the inclusion of Feypoolers for her to absorb, the amount of which being your choice. This is a pet peeve of mine, I will say. For any time an adventure says, hey, DM, it's up to you. Well, yeah, it's always up to me, but I'm reading your adventure. Go ahead and tell me what you think I should do, and then I, as the DM, can make a choice based on that. And one of the more egregious thing it does is the ending. It doesn't quite stick the landing, by which, I mean, you've got this huge, tightly woven narrative, all this storytelling, and then the ending is just, it's like the entire story just shrugs and says, well, what do you think, DM? Which I get that a part of it is like, how did it play out, right? With the way, like, what choices the players make. They don't really have a whole lot of choices. I guess it's more like what are their feelings about Marietta when they come out the other side of this? What have they discovered? But I still feel like this just gives a bunch of what ifs. Like there's almost more questions than there are statements here. Like the question of the design, like asking me, the DM, who's going to run it. That is a pet peeve of mine. Just go ahead and tell me, like, hey, if this happens, this happens. If this happens, this happens. And then I, as the DM, can make any modifications or adjustments as I see fit based on how my game actually happened. Like, obviously, that's just part of how to run a tabletop RPG, where things can change and will change. But I want you, the design team, to still give me those scripted encounters, give me a proper epilogue, or give me, two or three different epilogues that can happen. Like, hey, if they spare Marietta, then this can happen. If they decide to destroy her once and for all, if she can be destroyed once and for all, then this happens. If the hag has been destroyed once and for all, then this happened. Just give me very concrete things to go to, and then I can kind of modify those things as I want to. I do like this final fight because it's got multiple forms, which is a great way to do a boss fight. It's just a kind of annoyed that they're like, well, I don't know how many Feypoolers you want to use, which is important because one of her abilities is like you can absorb, the cursed masses that she's got who are worshiping her, which there's a whole thing. By the way, the whole beauty thing, I kind of crossed over that, is she's like obsessed with beauty now. She thinks it was her own ugliness. And then she's tearing down all these old statues of her old self, and then she's making everybody obsessed with her, specifically her beauty. So that was kind of why it's called the Feypool Beauty. Anyway, so you can like spare her because it's kind of a tragic figure who's suffering from her own, tragedy and things that have happened in her past and her toxic mentality now, or you destroy her once and for all. Like, you've got cool options at the end, but I just wish it was more firmly spelled out. I just thought the ending is a little too abrupt and brief for everything that's happened beforehand. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Feypool Beauty. Pros: excellent layout and organization. Man, I love the way this thing looks, and I love the way that it tells me its information, because this one could have been a mess. It honestly very easily could have been a mess with how dense this story is and how much information there is and how much backstory, and again, it cares so much about its villain and what you need to know about her and how you present that information. Like, it could have been so messy and so hard to figure out, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. It does a great job of conveying its story. That doesn't mean I would still say this is recommended for all DMs. I think it's still a very complex adventure to run, but I think the design team did as good a job as they possibly could have in conveying the information they needed to convey. And, using just subheadings and just the different chapter breakdowns, the sidebars, like, all of that is very, very well done to make it so that I was reading along and being like, okay, I understand I understand it would still be a tricky thing to run live at the table, but I would know beforehand, like, everything I need to know. And I would feel confident going into it that I have all that information. Pro: huge detailed town with over 40 rooms and areas to explore. Not a dungeon crawl adventure at all. This is really kind of an urban adventure, although it takes place in a unique, urban setting where it's this isolated, I think it was said it was 2,000 people. So not like a small village, but, and it's got, these big walls and stuff, but it's still supposed to be like the classic, like, isolated, cut off, kind of rural village in the middle of this dangerous swampland. But it's still humongous. Like, there's so much to explore and do in here, and that makes it tricky for a DM because you kind of have to look at all the things at once instead of going like a room-to-room dungeon crawl. It really opens things up. So you're talking about those three pillars of D&D: combat, exploration, role-playing. This one absolutely fulfills exploration a ton because it's up to the players to explore and talk to and investigate all these different areas and regions within this town. Role-playing will kind of obviously come with that because it's a town, so there's people everywhere to talk to. Combat, it's very light on, and another thing I would probably caution, why I said like the hack and slash crew might not like this as much. There's really not very much combat. There's that chimera fight in the beginning. There's some crawling claw battle in the cabin. There's the final boss fight. And then between there's not really a lot of good like opportunities for even like, to fight a bunch of charmed townsfolk or anything. It's very, very light on combat in that way. But if you go into that and you think your players are going to be okay with that, it is a friggin' awesome place to explore. Pro: climactic multi-stage boss battle. I did put on my pro at the end because I do love the boss fight. It has two unique stat blocks to battle, and I just love the idea. I think Mythic Odyssey did this first, where it's like a creature kind of has like two forms, and it go, very video gamey. It goes from like first form and then its mythic form later on. But in this case, she like completely changes her stat block, going from the first form, which is a spellcaster with this very creepy, cool Feyblade spell, where like her freaking, like, it's like a T-1000 but for flesh or something. Like, her arm just becomes like this fucking sword she attacks with. It's really cool. And there's a whole sidebar here you can actually use descriptions for, which is greatness. And then once you defeat that form, then she becomes this corpse mound thing, which is not a spellcaster, but can like absorb people into her body, and it's super creepy, and it's the classic horror thing. It all feels like that, just great climax upon climax. So I loved the multi-stage boss fight, and especially because those were two unique stat blocks that the party gets to battle at the end. And then of course a big pro is going to be the absolutely beautiful full color maps. My goodness sakes, just incredible, amazing. I can't say enough good things about this map design, and it just elevates everything way above and beyond to what I was expecting. Cons, my only con is I think the ending is just a little too abrupt and vague for me. Just trying to scroll back. By the way, we do get appendix full of creatures and a little bit of the family tree, which is cool. It just annoyed me, right? It's too much vagaries, it's too much hand waving for everything that's been so carefully detailed and explored, and all this information given. All of a sudden, the ending, the designer's kind of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. What's going to happen, DM? You tell me. And it's like, well, give me your best case scenarios, and then play out those. I'm really looking for like sidebars also that have some nice in-game like text that I can say, like maybe Miria's got a final thing she can say, or the hag's got something she can say, or townsfolk, like something. I need more to, with everything that's happened before. It's such a story-rich thing. I don't want to have to scramble as a DM to be like, in fact, as I was saying earlier, I would feel so prepared about running the adventure because of everything, how well it's organized. Except for the ending, I would not at all be well prepared for actually running the ending of this adventure, so that is a mark against it. Final verdict, not for newbie DMs. The Feypool Beauty is a densely detailed, tightly woven horror mystery featuring a tragic villain and a memorable story. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel, and you can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. Thank you.